podcasting is literally like what I would do with a casting tape or a production sizzle when I'm trying to sell a show, except it's so much more. It's the seed.
You're watching Young and Profiting Podcast on YouTube. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Hala Taha, and on Young and Profiting Podcast, we investigate a new topic each week and interview some of the brightest minds in the world. Before we get started, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified every time we drop a new video. Welcome, Vinnie.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course, super excited for this conversation. I love having friends on the show.
Yes.
You are a new friend.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear a bit about your career journey because I host a podcast where a lot of young people listen to.
Yes.
And a big question people have is like, how do I break into the entertainment industry? And you are the guy.
Oh my gosh.
For this.
I got goosebumps when you said that.
So everybody asks me this question, whether they're upcoming podcasters or just regular people that want to work in this industry. So talk to us about your career journey. How did you get into this field? What did you end up doing? What are some highlights of your career?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for asking that question and getting me to talk a little bit about putting some of the chaos that I've experienced into, some real kindness and a real format for success. I worked at MTV for 10 years, from 1998 to 2007. And in my time there, I was able to start a talent development department, which was an internal department, a casting department that cast the VJs for TRL and MTV News and MTV2. I went on for MTV Tres. And had an awesome time working at MTV and then launching my own agency. Prior to MTV, when I went to school, I thought I would be a Broadway producer. I knew I wanted to work, in New York, and I knew I wanted to create content. I also knew I needed to be surrounded by talent. I've always felt up-leveled when surrounded by truly amazing talent. And some of the talent I got to surround myself with in the beginning part of I got to cast Beyonce in her first film, bring Mandy Moore to MTV Network. Wow. We changed what, hidden camera shows looked like with Punk'd. We changed what the narrative of reality TV and families with the Osbournes, broke down barriers with Laguna Beach and The Hills and Newlyweds. But none of that would have happened if I didn't have some technical skills. When I was 15, I learned to wire 2 VCRs together, and I literally would I would make my edits on 2 VCRs, and VCRs, you kind of had like a 30-second window for pause and record. You kind of had to time it perfectly, which helped build my endurance, which kept my stamina high, which kept me alert. I was still able to answer phone calls and edit at the same time. And I think that having a real technical skill ultimately is what helped push me over through. I'm sure they can. I don't know why I got hired at MTV, but I'll tell you what my technical skills were. I was killer at writing one sheets. I can write decks that were beautiful. I'm solid around Adobe. I'm great at file management. None of those have anything to do with finding people. You know what I mean? So it's a weird skill set to have for a casting person. My boss, Rod Asa, he was the brilliant casting mind. He didn't need extra help casting. He needed help organizing it. And I got to learn from literally, I think, the best person in this industry, who created the Osbournes and Newlyweds and Punk'd and created this genre of storytelling and brand empowerment and allowing people to claim who they want to be. And now with podcasts, and now we can own it. Yeah. That's crazy. That was not the option
it's
20
amazing.
years ago.
I love it.
Isn't that?
Coming from somebody who almost had a reality TV show so many times,
yeah.
I don't even know if you know I was almost on Love and Hip Hop. Mona Scott was begging me to drop out of school and be on Love and Hip Hop when I had the sorority of hip hop and dating my producer boyfriend.
Well, you're in the center of all culture right there.
Exactly.
So yeah, that makes sense. And I love Mona.
Yeah. So she was begging me to be on Love and Hip Hop. Then I almost had a show on MTV that they filmed me all summer. They pulled the plug.
Right.
And that was so tough. We'll get into that in a bit. I do want my listeners to learn more about your field. So
sure.
A lot of people, they see the entertainment industry. They think, I can be an actor and actress. But there's so many other roles in that world. So talk to us about some of the different ways that you can have a career in this industry without actually being the talent.
Oh, yeah. What a great question. Because growing up, there was no one who cast unscripted shows. Unscripted shows didn't exist, and there also was no casting directors who went around doing it. So I did not grow up thinking this is what I wanted to do or be. I didn't think this was an even opportunity. To be honest, MTV is one of those platforms that empowers their youth, especially youth staff for youth culture programming. So I was very lucky to work for an organization that trusted me to do my skill set. But I've got to be honest, I think I made it up. I don't know how someone ever wrote my first job description because it didn't exist. My department didn't exist. I almost didn't focus either, by the way, on what I wanted to be called. I wasn't concerned with being a casting director or a producer. I knew that I wanted to bring out the best in people if I was given that opportunity to do so. And the best in people could be super fun on some fun MTV shows that I can mention. It can be super ratchet on some shows, that came, in the reality wave, shortly thereafter. Luckily, that part of TV programming is gone. Yeah. I think we, the people, have a big control over how those characters enter. We didn't have control over how the characters entered in at first, but when we did see how characters were being portrayed, we certainly had responsibility to ourselves and others to portray ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we took, we meaning the public and not the creating producers, because only producers created for the first 10 years of reality TV. The last 15 years, we had the ability to create on our phones. When you wanted to go live 15 years ago, you went to a studio, a network, TRL, 3:30 after school, right? Like there's a place and time. Right. And now we have the ability to go live. And even so I focused on, and also I got into casting. I didn't know anyone. You're supposed to know people when you get into the media industry, right? And I really, to be honest, didn't. I'm pretty quick at meeting people. I'm okay to walk up to people and say hi, and I'm quick to explain my value and the proposition I'm bringing to the table and connect you to, the people that I'm working with or the people that I trust, more importantly. And I followed that. I followed my gut and I followed that guide. And, their casting directors have this wonderful skill set of, finding people and processing, meaning like understanding and producing sort of a tape that executives can watch. But there's this whole other part of casting that I fell in love with, the development piece, the career piece that needed to happen before the green light happened. If only she had a company, if only there was a little bit more press, if only that press spoke about her interest in designing. And then there's these little tiny pieces of feedback that I would get throughout, say, the first 10, 15 years of my casting. And I would go out and do all that. I was lucky to be an employee at MTV. Most casting projects tend to be project to project. I was lucky to be staffed at a network where I had a home base, so I could take risks and invest in talent. And I could call up Wade Robson and say, Wade, why don't you have a dance show on MTV? Let's do like a dance show. What does that look like? I don't know. Come in. Let's figure it out. And then the Wade Robson Dance Project happens. Or Ashton comes in and says, I want to have a show. I want to produce TV. He didn't want to be on TV. And the reason why his version of hosting on Punk'd was what it was, as opposed to the traditional microphone sort of stand-ups, was like he did not need to or want to be on camera, but we felt like as a network that would help push the show over. So it pushed him to be even more creative, which I love this part, to be more creative, to figure out how to break that wall down, to build the space where he could be sitting in a black box with a wooden stool with his trucker caps talking to camera in a very deconstructed way. And it's that in-between piece. It's that intermedia piece of media that I've loved. Working with big stars on MTV, not on their biggest projects. Like I didn't work with Beyonce on her music, and I have nothing to do with her success as an artist, but I did get to put her in, and I was part of the casting team that put her in her first film, a hip opera. And a Carmen, a hip opera. And, we didn't win her any awards, but I hope we were like on her, I hope we were on her reel when the gods that be cast her in Dreamgirls. And so like, it's nice to know I was in her audition reel.
You basically helped people like get to where they are. And that's like one of your favorite things to do is kind of help people get discovered in the way that they want to get discovered. Yeah,
because they're, it's like reading the stars, right? So like we use stars as an analogy a lot when we talk about celebrities because there's a guiding force and there's a light and a shine that comes from us. But when you're trying to measure stars, when you're trying to see star movement, when you're trying to, it's a really robust world. And, maybe we'll remember where the North Star is by remembering it's one star north of the Small Dipper. Is that true or Big Dipper? Oh, gosh. I have no idea. So here, I have to go back to these. This is an iPhone generational issue that I don't know the answer to this. But back then there was like, it's like the Big Dipper is like one star off of a constellation. And that the idea that you had to identify the constellation to know where north was, right? So being able to figure out direction, being able to give people tools and words that help them identify the awesome things that are happening that they don't have the words for yet. I love that about Clubhouse. Clubhouse to me was a huge awakening. I got on the words, the structure, the energy. There was so much that was happening that I was doing, but I was doing in my own silo because this last 2 years, a lot of us kind of worked in our own little silo. And here I am thinking I'm doing, I'm the most original person in the entire world doing the most original thing. And I get on Clubhouse and there's words to it. I think I'm launching 13 different people's podcasts or 20 podcasts. And then I hear someone say, well, you have a podcast network. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting that you see it that way. And now I can use those words
to describe what I'm doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I hear, because I focus on the doing piece a little bit more than I focus on what you're calling it. It was fun for the first 15 years to be able to say I was a reality casting director, and there were almost no other reality casting directors. So like for a long time,
that was your identity.
That was me, and in my version of casting, I believe in the law of manifestation and I believe in the law of abundance. I didn't go out looking for the people I was supposed to be casting. Yeah. I went out and looked for connectors. I went out and I called Hot 97. I called the VJ Flex. I called Funkmaster Flex to say, well, we've got this opening. Who should we be casting? Who should we be looking at? Those people are going to bring me closer to the answer for what I'm looking for. And I'm going to have a better experience finding that person because I didn't put the pressure on myself to find them. I was just really responsible and made sure everyone who I felt could lead me to the right hire knew of the opportunity.
That's really interesting. So I want to talk about identity for a little bit because you were with MTV for 10 years when MTV was like the coolest thing in the world. When I was getting shot from my show on MTV, it was right after Jersey Shore. It was around 2013. They shot me in 2011 and 2013. It was after you left. Mm-hmm. I did 2 pilots with them. But even then, MTV was huge. Yeah. It's not that big anymore. But at the time, it must have felt really nice to be like, I'm Vinnie and I work at MTV. Right? It must have felt like you were like king of the world.
Well, certainly here in New York.
King of New York. And as he rose up the ranks and as reality TV was hotter than ever. How did it feel? Why did you leave MTV and how did it feel when you left? Was it really hard to be Vinnie on his own without MTV's Vinnie in front of it?
That's some of the answer is perspective. What I didn't know yet. For example, when I left MTV in 2007, I still hadn't even created my own personal Gmail email address. I didn't even have my own email address. I only had vinnie.potestivo@mtv.com. So part of what I didn't know, which is kind of always blissful, to be really honest. And I think even the way I would approach casting or creating something is I try to come to it with as clear a mind as possible without as many restrictions. Because, man, I can talk myself out of something that I'm 100% sure of. 2 seconds later, I'm like, how did I talk myself? That is some special ability to do that. I'm so sorry. I just forgot. Oh my God, I just had a
identity of MTV.
Oh yeah. part of my identity. So I'm definitely in people's cell phones as MTV Vinnie. The ironic part is that as soon as I left MTV, there was a different Vinnie who came in from Jersey Shore, who was way more the Vinnie from MTV than I ever got to be. So I'm a little bit jealous about that. There's a little bit, but I have to be honest, MTV in 2007, by the time I had left, MTV wasn't what it was when I started. The culture wasn't coming from television the way that it used to, the same way that I flocked to working in the music industry. And I would go out every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night in New York, because culture and pop culture and news and deals and relationships and TV shows all happened from like 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. out at night. Like that's where the community piece was. So for a long time, my successes are predicated on the successes of the talent that I hired. And for a long time, I held on to the shows as what I was most proud of. Osbourne's, Newlyweds, Punk, Laguna Beach, The Hills, Run's House, Andy Mill. I can come up with like Eighth and Ocean, the first show that I ever got to create. And all of those shows ended up, they're in 4:3 ratio and they're not in HD, and media gets old. There's a time on media. The people before us talked about tape, and now we're talking about cards, and the generation next is clouds. So it's very interesting how you try to prove yourself in this industry where you're only as great as your last hit. You're only as successful as the last superstar or star that you sort of launched. When I left in 2007, there were two events that happened. One is in 2006, the Ashlee Simpson show was doing great. Ashlee had a horrible moment on SNL, and ultimately we ended up not moving forward with the Ashlee Simpson show. And I was asked to go out and find the next Ashlee Simpson show. And I found this amazing singer. She was dating Travie McCoy. She was a Christian recording artist who was about to become a pop star, and she was writing her first pop album. And MTV was like, that is never going to work for us. And Katy Perry had a very profitable career and a successful career without and despite this, being able to get a show on MTV. I had to go out and find when Benji and Joel from Good Charlotte had graduated from MTV and were moving on to projects, I went out and looked for a new host for All Things Rock. And I remember bringing Pete Wentz into MTV, and MTV was like, he's not even like the lead singer. Like, what are you doing, Vin? What are you bringing in to us? And I realized in that moment, maybe my definition of talent has changed, or maybe their definition of talent has changed. Like they're trying to work on this show with Tila Tequila, who's supposed to be like a #1 MySpace artist who doesn't even have a single on MySpace, let alone a track or anything else to substantiate that. And I have to be honest, I was a little turned off by the development of her series. When she pitched her dating show to MTV, the twist of the sexuality wasn't there. And then when it did come back, it did. And I just got to a point where I didn't want to pass on. You never want to be the person to tell your work no, and you never want to be the person that says, this isn't right. But ultimately, I just felt called to, one, tell a story to a different audience. I tried to get Project Runway bought by MTV. MTV didn't want that. Kardashians slipped through. Well, Kardashians was a different show, and then it wasn't pitched quite as the Osbournes, but even then that show, slipped through MTV's the fingers. And to your point, there were a lot more screens being introduced in 2007, 2006. AOL Music, I think, had the biggest impact on TRL. And then the iPod came, and then, all that stuff, all of those pieces of technology.
So you ended up basically feeling like you had to leave.
I felt like it was time for, if I wanted to keep developing talent, and if I was going to work with the talent that I wanted to be working with, that the best way for me to work would be to leave the network.
So let me ask you a question. Let's move into personal branding and becoming a celebrity.
Yes.
Do you feel like anybody can be a celebrity, or is there some sort of qualities that make somebody a good celebrity?
Gotcha. All right. So I think that everyone can be celebrated.
Okay.
And I think that we often get celebrities and people who we are celebrating confused because of the speed of social media and maybe people not being as impeccable as I wish they could be in speech. But I also think it's wonderful that we can refer to each other as celebrities and that we give ourselves the grace to put us on that stage that we put, some of these icons that we grew up on. That being said, with the screens being smaller, larger, rounder, it's all about audiences. So what makes a person a celebrity is being celebrated, and you need an audience for that. And there are more places for audience to congregate than ever. So how do you let your audience celebrate you? I think that to me becomes an important and interesting piece of the brand, and also part of your brand ID. How will you are you selling them t-shirts and constantly selling them things, and you have this sort of relationship with them that where they feel good about buying your merch and they feel rewarded, and that's because that's the ecosystem that you built for them. So if you don't come out with merch, then they're disappointed because you're not giving them the opportunity to purchase the way you ask them to celebrate your brand financially. Then there are what we probably would refer to as like celebrities who are really making impact. And I almost drop my voice down when I say this, but like the people who aren't just making an impact in media on camera, but are doing it in real life too. And I'm seeing celebrities, especially in podcasting, where it's the first time they can own their own media. Like usually, I mean, they're celebrities and they're famous but they're for hire. Like they're getting a paycheck. They don't own the thing that they're showing up for unless you're at a certain caliber.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? So this is a different playing field, and how people choose to allow their audience to celebrate them, I think is there's a secret in longevity in that. I think if it's an emotional setup, if you're rewarding them with great information, if you're rewarding them by letting them in on your wins and your fails and your human moments, then you're not asking them to celebrate you at any given moment. You're just giving them the opportunity to celebrate you and your wins and also theirs at a time that works for them.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that about podcasting. I know people hate the algorithm, but I love that about the algorithm is that it gives people the time to be present in what they need to do so that hopefully when the algorithm tells them it's time to move on, or when they feel like it's time to move on, that the right image or video or, sort of messaging is there.
Totally. So we were talking offline and you were mentioning that discoverability is something that's really important to you.
Yeah.
And you feel like you were able to help people become more searchable and visible to the people they want to be visible to.
Yeah.
So talk to us about some things that we can do to become more visible in our industry and how we can stand out online and your guidance.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Because I'll tell you what, everyone's Googling, everyone is searching, right? And I promise you people are out there searching for you. And you might say, no, they don't know me. And you're right. They don't know you. That's why they're searching. And where do you think they're looking? On, I don't know, award lists is a great place. I love recommending people to win awards. Some awards, to be honest, you can buy. Some of them are $200 as an application fee. And unfortunately, it is what it is. But even to those, I have to say, the uptick to those is I know firsthand when a network executive tells their development team to write a list of 50 podcasters. I promise you, they're going to go look at award-winning lists. They're going to look at the W3 awards, the Communicator awards, the Telly awards, the Webby award, all of these awards that are approachable to brands on different levels, because it shows that you care, A, enough about your craft to submit $200 to win an award. B, by the way, even like we talk about celebrities, having different status, but or also someone has to pay for every single Emmy application nomination, that goes in.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah, these are not, there's first you pay to be part of the Emmys and to be part of the association. And then you pay per person submitted per project, per category. So paying for awards is not anything new at all.
See, I learned something new today. I thought that there's plenty of, I didn't realize that the Emmys is something that you have to pay to qualify for.
Networks. So even you'll hear some great stories where the network put up XYZ characters for leading, supporting male, whatever. and then the actor submitted themselves outside of the network. And, unfortunately, the politics inherent in that is like the network feels like you're usurping like their leadership, and are you hurting the cast if you're not following what the group sort of consensus is? But there are some great success stories of actors who felt the calling to stand up for themselves, put the money down, and claim what they felt like was theirs. And I think that when I look at so yes, so you have to pay to play, you have to pay to distribute your content on social media now, and you certainly have to pay to be vetted to see if you're winning awards. So winning awards I like to bring up because not only am I looking for award-winning people, it's people who care about their projects who are putting it out there. That certainly helps you be discoverable. Credits. The amount of people who don't update their credits, even on IMDb. IMDb allows, so you can't upload a digital series to IMDb as like as a project, but you can upload podcasts. You can put yourself as a guest, a producer, a host, if you want these types of credits. And IMDb and Google are like married for, like, you want to change.
You're giving me so many ideas.
Oh my God, I love that. I'll throw this out. You want to change what shows up on your Google search images in the same week, upload your IMDb images, your photos, or just upload 12 of them and see how many of them, pop in. Almost the same week, you'll see in Google image search, it pop up. But yeah, and I think IMDb is a great place to be. First off, traditionally, IMDb is kind of known as, it's the Internet Movie Database, and it's certainly where film and TV and actors and directors and sort of that traditional creatives are. But now that we have this extended creative family where traditionally non-creative people get to be creative, it's exciting how many doctors and specialists are on IMDb now. And they're saying, yes, I'm a doctor, I'm an orthopedist, I'm a brain surgeon, but I also make great content, and I can talk about what I do and make great content. That's going to up-level the conversation. That's going to reset the vocabulary. That's going to reset the vocabulary potential around that topic. That part to me I get the most excited about that.
Yeah, that's really exciting. It's a great tip, because you think it's usually actors and actresses, but you're saying any if you've been on a podcast, you can upload a profile and start a profile on IMDb.
Yeah. I also want to point out profiles. And there are some places on Instagram, there are certain ways and places and certain fields that are searchable versus others. On LinkedIn, certainly, if you're watching what you're putting in your, in these sections, you see how it populates Google, and it tells Google these words, if your SEO strategy. So if your SEO strategy and your brand strategy are not in sync, and you're using words to describe yourself that aren't being used to describe your services on your own page, you're doing a big disservice by not connecting those dots. Yeah. So by having a more linear approach to how you're describing yourself in social and copying that online and allowing the verbiage to match, it allows Google to understand why your website is relevant to these certain keywords that you're basically putting in there.
That's really interesting.
And I think that profiles is probably the biggest area of improvement. I think it's the easiest place where people can come in. And I can give other tips about standing out. On LinkedIn, there's the ability to let people see other accounts similar to yours. That's like an option. And I would say, like, don't click that option. Like, why would you? That's like someone comes in and tells you they want to watch your show, but then you go, well, what about all these other shows? No, they want to watch your show. Like,
so turn that option off.
Yeah, turn that option off. They don't need to see who else is similar to you. That's a distraction, and that's going to take them away from your profile.
You could turn that off.
Yeah, you can. LinkedIn has been, and that's the other part about being creative. And why I'm focusing in podcasting is the technology is changing. Even LinkedIn now has creator profiles, and we can reprioritize how we show content versus having to focus on some of the pieces of our resume that are great, but I can put media and content into action way quicker than I can put my old resume into action.
Yeah,
so totally. I like that about that. And they're making it easier to be discoverable and more discovered. these platforms. They're paying people. Instagram is paying people to do more live videos. The beautiful part about that is that we already know live videos do better performance anyway. So like we're literally paying people to do Instagram and Facebook are paying people to do something that's already inherently going to be more beneficial to the conversation. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool that we're at that stage of the game.
Yeah. Personal branding nowadays is so important because whether you like it or not, you have a digital personal brand. It's just, is it showing up the way that you want to show up as? That's the key. And you have control over that. I love your tips in terms of being on these award lists and submitting your profile and, you know, making sure your LinkedIn is all in check. I think those are all great tips. I know that you mentioned to me, I was asking you before we started, like, you know, what are some key things that you want to come across in this interview? And you talked about planting the seed. So before you even start your personal brand, you need to know, I guess, what you want to grow into eventually. And you do that by planting the seed. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I love planting the seed because so often we wish that we were blooms that came in overnight and we think we want to be like this beautiful flower and we have no vision of what that flower should look like. We have no understanding of how big of a pot that flower needs or how much sunlight, you know, that flower, how much love and support and nurturing that needs. When you start off as a seed, when you're really scaling back and showing up for yourself in the most simple way, you're removing and stripping any of those stressors that could misdirect your growth. And I love planting seeds in personal development and brand development because it allows people to grow into their decisions instead of having to wake up and suddenly change, you know.
So give us an example.
So for example, seeding here. So for the last 2 years, I've been making podcasts, and I 2 years ago started making my own podcast, but knew that I wanted to have more expertise in the actual physical production of it. So for the last year and a half, I've been seeding my audience knows that I'm learning how to make podcasts. I'm learning them to make them for other people, and have now made them for dozens of people. They also know that I love talking to people. I've always had that part of my personality in casting. They understand that there's this like relationship, on and off camera relationship, or as a producer, on and off camera relationship where I'm talking and I tend to cut my voice off. So I've been showing up on social media talking more about that so I can prep people for this podcast journey that I'm about to be on. And I'm giving myself the space to step into it without pressure and the grace to do it in a way that I feel I can be called to, but also I can still show up and impress.
I love that. And I think the other benefit there, which you might not realize, is you're holding yourself accountable. Like, for example, when I first started a podcast, I announced it to everybody on LinkedIn, like, I'm starting a podcast. It's going to launch on this day. It made me go towards that goal because I didn't want to let everybody down because I had announced it. So I think it also kind of gives you that accountability piece that might help you actually complete your goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's interesting you say that because I flubbed twice now my launch date. And part of it, and I actually, my clients pointed this out, and I didn't realize I say this, but I tend to focus more on impact than deadline, especially if I have control over the deadline. Like I worked on too many TV shows that were rushed, and
it's not worth it to you.
It just didn't look, the message wasn't what we wanted the message to be, but it had to hit air, and all of that time and energy spent was wasted because we had to hit time and money, and that's the business structure of television. With podcasting, that's not the structure. So I would love to have launched already because trust me, I would love to be in stride. Like no one loves flow more than me. I love creative flow, and I just love being present and not feeling stressed out, but also being lost and vulnerable and excited about how am I going to get out of the situation I keep putting myself into because I want something sort of new to come out of it. So but that keeps me accountable for impact, which led me to a whole different way to structure my podcast than I had initially started off to. And that started when we had our conversation, to be honest. And that sort of solidified the structure of how I wanted to move forward with podcasting. We talked about that maybe 5 months ago. I started creating podcasts 2.5 years ago for myself.
Super interesting. So talk to us about why you decided to basically leave TV or do less of it to work on podcasts? Like, what opportunity do you see? How is it different than TV in your opinion?
You know, I worked at MTV from 98 to 2007, and I certainly gave that network a lot of credit for creating culture because we put shows up, people talked about it. What I wasn't aware of was the amount of growth of screens that would happen outside of TV. So I hate to say that. I don't know if I think you have to reach a certain percentage of an audience for there to be a cultural impact, whether that is a personality, whether that impact is understanding a personality type or a family or a celebrity or a relationship or something like that, you know. So I gave MTV a lot of credit for contributing to culture the way they did because they were creating shows that clearly were contributing to culture. What I wasn't aware of was how many eyeballs were being forced to watch MTV because there was no screens. So as more screens got included, the impact of the shows I was having was less and less. It was exciting to work on a show for 10 episodes and then suddenly have everyone in the world talking about Laguna Beach or Punk'd or Newlyweds, just or the Ashlee Simpson show. Just it's cool to put something out there and get that reaction back. What I was missing from my TV experience was the cultural reaction to content. And if I'm going to be part of a project, I like to move the needle. I loved creating content for MTV because you're in front of the youth culture. What better way to set an impression and give words to, you know, like what could potentially be happening. And TV kind of lost that. And I saw in social media, I saw brands have a need for an executive who can come in to a non-creative company, help them build a department, a creative department, a social media department, a copywriting department, a content team, whatever it is, you know, and have that directly impact their business infrastructure and let them have ownership of their own creativity without impeding its success. So I can help them be creative so that they don't have to worry about making like sort of the wrong decisions piece to that. And the return from social media is, I mean, killer. It's just like the audience cares. Even if it's a smaller audience, they care that you made it. They care that it impacts them. There's just a different relationship. And I think MTV used to have that relationship with people when you would turn it on and then leave the room. You know, you can kind of listen to MTV and not have to watch it and experience it. And I feel that I get that out of podcasts, and I feel that I get that out of social media. What I love most about podcasts, fundamentally why I'm shifting what I'm doing and focusing on podcasting, is I truly believe that everyone should have a podcast. I firmly believe that. And it's not because I think they should be media companies or they should own their own they should own their own narrative and have control over that, because some people don't want that.
Yeah.
But there's never been a moment in the creative sort of world, there's never been a moment in America where we can create something, publish it, and retain ownership of it. And that ownership is transferable in a way that allows us to take these podcasts and turn them into TV series and films and books and classes and ebooks and lectures and potential collaborations and fitness lines and just podcasting is literally like what I would do with a casting tape or a production sizzle when I'm trying to sell a show, except it's so much more. It's the seed. It's seeding. Podcasting is seeding. It's me saying, here's the conversations I want to have. I'm seeding the audience, right? For my brand, my personal brand here, I'm saying, this is the seed I'm planting. Let's talk about creativity. Let's talk about sustainability. Let's talk about ways to be innovative. And who are some really impactful people that I may recognize on camera, and what's their sort of approach to it? Because if they're successful, they must have something working for them.
Yeah.
And I like that piece of it. But I think that there's nothing more malleable than podcasts. Like, you can turn it into anything, and also there's no rules. It can be 2 minutes, 5 minutes,
exactly.
45 minutes.
There's no rules.
Daily, weekly.
And you get to own it.
Yes.
And you have control. And as somebody who has been rejected over and over again, I've been picked.
Yeah.
we want you to lead the show, but you're not good enough. We want you to do this, but you're not good enough.
Not good enough, but didn't do enough what they wanted you to do.
I don't know. That's a whole other conversation of why we think that I didn't get my reality TV show when I was offered one so many times, right?
Training, right? It was giving you this moment.
Exactly.
Imagine if someone said to you, "Oh, Holly, you're under contract. You can't." No. There's no Young and Profiting. That's ours.
Exactly.
That would be.
So I know. So thank God I'm out on my own and I own my own thing. And to your point, podcasting has so much opportunity. And I agree. I think everybody should have a podcast. It's such a great way to even just meet new friends. Forget about the business or the fame or just have great conversations and learn new things. So I totally agree there. Okay. So my last couple of questions for you. You are somebody who finds talent. You must meet a lot of people who have a lot of charisma. Mm-hmm. What are the things that make people shine as a talent? Like, what are the personality traits that you look for or that we should hone if we want to be seen as somebody who's influential or who can be a celebrity or who can be talent? What are the things that you look for in a person?
Oh, I love that question. Decision making, the ability to decide quickly and understand how you feel about something, and then also knowing what you would do with that information, especially in reality TV or unscripted TV. It's like knowing that this person not only will come to a realization, but will also take action on it, and I think that is something that I look for, even in traditional in acting, even in hosts, I look for that, because like I'm hiring people who are going to make big change off camera. And I'll let you be on camera and get the notoriety you do, because I know that there's a much bigger goal for you there. And by making content, it makes it a little bit easier to see that goal. So there are celebrities that are on social media now that are talking about mental health all the time. And if I want to be working with a celebrity that is aligned in mental health, I now know what their alignments are, versus before where I would have to guess, and it'd be a very different process. So decision making is a huge one. I think being impeccable in your speech, being super articulate and understanding what you want to say. It's okay if the words don't come out right, but the tone and the intonation and the direction of the conversation,
like confidence. In that way. Yeah.
No one wants to. I think the easiest way for me to return to you week after week is if I know where you stand. And understanding your point of view, understanding where you stand on certain issues, without knowing what those issues are, but knowing that those issues are going to come up. So every week I have someone like you that I can, having a strong point of view, a personal sense of style. It doesn't necessarily mean a good sense of style, but just your own unique way of presenting yourself. That's some good old fashioned MTV tricks that were certainly beaten to my head, because you want people who visually connect with their audience the same way that they do internally. And to your point, that's all about communicating the idea and making sure that.
Well, what I'm hearing is consistency. So consistency in how you show up, consistency in how you make decisions or your beliefs, consistency in how you dress.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's funny you even mentioned consistency in how you dress. I remember at MTV when Susie Castillo and Vanessa Manillo were on the air. We always there was always like, well, they both have dark hair, so one should have curly hair and one should have straight hair. Like someone's hair was always kind of in a high pony, and someone's hair was down. Oh. The consistency piece is important. You'll notice it, and I'll say this now, you'll notice it as you're watching the Today Show or any morning show where there's an ensemble cast and there's a good old fashioned wardrobe closet out. They stick to their colors. And there's a reason why that works, is that balance. And some of that needs to be predictable, because as a creative, especially as an executive producer, you want to make sure the shot has pop and there's a right color balance in it too. So you have to be able to articulate those pieces to be able to fit in an ensemble series and a group series. And even podcasting has shifted from being able to be something that we do in our tiny little silos to we need 2, 3, 4, 5 people. We need more people working on this to make it what it needs to be seen, so that it has the impact that it can have. And I like that piece of it.
Well, this is so exciting. I'm so excited for your new podcasting journey. Tell everybody about your new network, your new show that's coming out.
Oh, I'm so excited. I have a podcast. It's available anywhere where you listen to podcasts. And then I have a podcast on TV, which I'm super excited. It's a 30-minute show. It's being distributed by Bespoke TV on Direct TV on Thursday nights, prime time, which I'm super excited about. And I think it's turning into, it's a little bit like inside the actor studio for us, creatives that have a process that we can identify only after we've done it and try to make into the 2020 piece to what we do, where we love looking back and trying to make sense of what it is so that we can be at peace with it or okay with it, the process that it is. And I love understanding those processes because it helps me it helps me record stronger. It helps me be more articulate, have sharper questions, have better eye contact, better breathing and phrasing. All comes from those things.
Really cool. And the last question I ask all my guests, and this is an opportunity to give a piece of advice or gem that you never mentioned yet, is what is your secret to profiting in life?
Oh, I love that. Sharing.
Sharing.
Yeah, sharing. I profit the most when I share. And I don't do it because of the return, but the parts where I am most profitable or successful financially or emotionally in my career have always been when I'm sharing that moment. And it's hard for me sometimes to release control. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's hard to release control and trust somebody to be able to create something larger than what you could have done yourself. And in that sharing or collaborating, we can call it, but in that sharing, that's where I'm at my best. And some people would say, well, isn't it weird that at your best, if you're sharing it with somebody, that's 50-50. So if you're profiting, you're only 50% of, 50% of what I make with someone else, I promise you, is way more than 100% of what I would have made for myself.
I totally agree. I think collaborating is so powerful and quite honestly underrated. And I feel like every successful person that I know has a team and prides themselves in their team. And you can scale yourself 10x, 20x, 30x when you have a team.
Yeah.
You can do so much more when you're not just on your own. And there's people have so many different strengths to pull on that are your weaknesses. So I totally agree.
That's so true. But maybe I don't know what I'm about to say here, but before money, when there was a barter system and shells for shells and cows for cows, and there's that system, and I can understand how tactile things can be traded. Now in 2021, where IP and the intellectual property and our own processes and the information we have and how we're able to connect certain dots together, you would think because the social media or the internet is out there that all this information is so easily sort of connected, and it's not. And it needs us to show up to connect them. And we need to be two lost people who see each other from across the aisle and say, oh, that's how I'm connecting this dot. This is how these two dots will connect. And that's what I love about podcasting too, because again, television is like a highway. There's speed, there's railings, there's MPHs, deadlines. There's the rich cars, the not rich, all of that. Podcasting is like a 360. I hate 360 because it's you can grow out instead of growing forward. You can, and I love that idea. So I started talking about money earlier and exchanging it and sort of where we're going, because we can now combine ideas and science and opinions and facts and stories in a way that never happened before, because our stories are creating platforms that they're informing how we're sharing stories too. Yeah. So it's just, it's a very exciting time to be creating content and media. I'm happy I have my TV background. So I come from earned media. So I try to make everything great. And
all those experiences are going to help you now in different ways.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I have to say, you make me feel pumped about being a podcaster in my position right now, because I'm like, damn, I did this on my own, and that's pretty powerful when you think about now all these people from TV are coming at it.
All these TV people.
I'm really glad that I started 4 years ago, let me tell you.
Yeah, and I'm kind of bummed. did my first podcast, Man and Wife, in 2007. It's been 14, 13 years now since I've touched podcasts, which is a bummer that, I kind of stepped away from it. But
it's all good. It's not too late. It's never too late.
And that's the beauty of podcasting is that when people want you, if you've prepared yourself and if you've done your job to be discoverable, then they will find you.
Exactly. Awesome. So where can our listeners go to learn more about you and everything that you do, Vinnie?
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. I'm on all social media. I'm Vinnie Potestivo on everything. And I just reach out and say hi and let me know what's going on. And I do have one-on-one clients, and I am opening up a development mastermind in November, and I'm getting ready to do my first keynote speech in October. So I have some fun personal things that I'm working on that I hope trigger some more opportunities to work with people. But the way I love starting off any relationship is just like reach out and say hi and like, let's just chat a little bit. And
and
I don't mind that.
I love that. He is really nice and really open. You can find him on Instagram. I'll put all his links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Vinnie. It was a great conversation.
Oh, you rock. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Young and Profiting Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please write us a review or comment on your favorite platform. Nothing makes us happier than reading your reviews. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and on social media. I always repost, reshare, and support those who support us. You can find me on Instagram at YAP with Hala or LinkedIn. Just search for my name. It's Hala Taha. Big thanks to the YAP team as always. This is Hala signing off.